I've got a lot to cover. I will try, if you can try to hold your questions till the end, I'll try to save a minute or two, but I just want to make sure that I do get through all of them. If you're tweeting this, of course, we're CILDC, and my handle is MEBS, and my slides are on my slide deck as well as on the conference web page. Okay, so clues on super searching, and I realize how much of super searching is done up here. It's not a particular search technique as much as it is thinking differently about search and starting with a question that almost seems too basic, but that's why we sometimes go right past it, is what's the point? What's going to be happening to the results? Because knowing what's going to happen next will inform how you approach the search. You could get the very same question twice, but the results are very different because the needs of your client or patron are different. So remember, it's not just, oh yeah, that question about X, Y, Z, it's that question about X, Y, Z that this person needs because they're going to be doing this with the results instead. Another question that I always have to ask myself before I get started is, what is the answer going to look like? Is this something where my client is expecting a sort of black and white yes, no answer? Is it just a factual thing where I just have to dig up facts? Or are they looking for perspective, points of view, possibilities, trends, more amorphous things where you kind of have to decide when you're going to stop because it's, you could always do more. Don't we love those kinds of searches? Well, we do when we have infinite amount of time, but unless any of you have discovered the infinite time machine, we hate projects like that. Boy, that's innovation. And then thinking about, what do I need to know first? Is there someone could have been Linda Cooper, one of the early super searchers said to me, your first client is yourself. So what that means is when you have a search, you're often first getting smart enough about the topic, the information available, the resources that are available. That's the research that you're doing for yourself. You'll never show that to your client or patron, but that's the underlying research that needs to be done in order to get to the real answer. And again, we sometimes forget to spend that initial time doing our own research to enable better research, if you follow that. We sometimes forget and go straight to the answer, and it's like, wait a minute, maybe I don't know enough about this right now. Maybe I need to get myself smart before I do anything else. Staying focused, and this is, okay, I actually should include a third thing there. We need to separate, when we're doing the research, what's the stuff that's essential, and what's the stuff that's tangential. But then there's also what are the things that are peripheral but important? And it's sort of balancing that laser-like, laser-like focus on finding the answer, finding the best information, but also watching for the outliers, because those things are important too. And in fact, I think outliers are especially important because that's where we compete with a search engine. The search engine will always show you the most likely answers, the obvious things. Obviously, search engines, contribute to confirmation bias in a huge way because they try to answer the question the way you ask it. And so you never get a peripheral perspective. You never get those outliers identified when you're using a general purpose web search engine like Google. So we have to think about, as we're doing the search, as we begin the search, it's like, what is it that's going to constitute the essential information I have to find versus what are the things I should watch for and file away in case they become important. Knowing when to say when. And this is the sort of thing where I would guess, here's a number off the top of my head, or as there's a social media post called Fake Library Statistics. Does everyone else read that too? Okay, we're gonna contribute to fake library statistics today. I would say that 83.5% of all research projects you could spend 3 times as much time on it as you actually have time to do it. Does that sound about right to everyone else? Okay, then it qualifies as a fake library statistic. You just found another one created there. So it's knowing when you have to stop and knowing how important this project is in the context of everything else that you're managing over the course of the day. You could spend all day on every project, but that's not respecting your time when you do that. I'm talking tomorrow about ROI and communicating value, so get me started then about how to value your time. Plan on spending at least a quarter of your time post-processing, doing all that stuff after you find it so that you're not doing a data dump to your user. I've realized that is not, you're not cheating your client out of 25% of your time. You're enhancing the investment you already made of time in doing the research. Do you see the difference? It's a really big difference. If we don't stop searching, we're losing the opportunity to really add value by making sense out of it, making it something that the user can absorb and do something with. Remember, when our clients or patrons or users, whatever we want to call those people, when they come to us, they're not just doing it because they want to see your shining face. They love you and they're groupies. They all are, so they're making up reasons to talk to you, I'm sure. But mostly they're asking you for stuff so that they can do something else, not just to keep you busy. So it's finding out what is it that they're going to be doing with it, and that's what that final 25% is for, is taking all the stuff that you found and making it easy for them to do the next thing, to make yourself as frictionless as possible. Focus on making the answer clear. And I do a fair amount of work for small businesses. The model is economic gardening. So the idea is to local municipalities will invest in local businesses because they realize if they sponsor local businesses and they grow, to twice from 50 to 100 employees, that's 50 more employees who won't leave the state when the economy goes bad. So it's a way of sustaining local businesses. Anyway, all this to say, those are people who have champagne taste and beer budget. So we need to focus exactly on what it is they need to know to make their next decision. So this was a real project. had a client who did respiratory therapy training. They made the mannequins that you practice some of this respiratory therapy stuff on. And they wanted to find schools where they could sell their stuff to. So we have a long discussion, but when you distilled it down, I wanted to get one question out of them. Is what's the question I'm answering so that I'll know when I should stop? Because that's the kind of thing that could, expand to take all the time in the world available. So I finally narrowed it down to, okay, what countries have the largest number of respiratory therapy training programs? That was the final question I came up with. When I delivered the results, the first thing on the results, on the report, dear so-and-so, enclosed are the results, period. Next paragraph. According to our analysis, the countries outside the US with the most respiratory therapy training programs are, in descending order, and then I had a list of 15 countries. Now, that in itself it looks really simple, and it sort of hides all of the work that was involved in going into it, but I always think of our users sort of like feral cats that you have to entice in, You can't just put the cat food out and expect them to come running and go, oh, it's Kitty Joy again or whatever. You have to sort of sneak them in and make it worth their while because they're wary and cautious beasts. So by giving them something, it's a simple answer. This is what you needed, here's the answer. And I don't stop there. Then on the next page, I go into more detail, the blah, 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 blah. And so whatever, you guys are gonna all read that, so I'm gonna go back because we're all librarians. We see small text and we start reading, right? Are we programmed or what? Anyway, so I give them the quick answer, and then I give them the more in-depth answer, and they are so happy because it's not a data dump to them. I told them what they needed to know at the beginning, and then I told them the story about what that meant. And I could only have the time to do that by stopping 3/4 of the way through my time and taking the last quarter of the time, not looking for more information, but just writing this up in a way that was useful for my user. You see the difference there? I mean, it doesn't take that much time. It takes a little practice, but it doesn't take that much time to get it done. It's just thinking differently about how you're going to do it. Okay, what about privacy? We have to talk about that because that's always an issue. And here's the deal. If what they're offering you is free, you're the product being sold, okay? So search engines are free. Facebook is free. Most social media is free, and that's because there's something being sold. So we get over that, and here's the deal. When I first started thinking about the whole Google filter bubble and everything's customized or personalized and that sort of thing, I got really weirded out about it. And then I embraced the Borg. And I realized that, yes, Google is monitoring my searches. To a certain extent, it's almost unavoidable. And I decided, okay, that is a feature and a bug. And in fact, I've told this story before, but it's one of those things that once you see it, you never go back. I'd been doing a bunch of research on an individual. And I searched to see if he had a Twitter account. Couldn't find a Twitter account, okay, whatever. I keep doing more Google searching for him. And this Twitter account showed up in the search results of Google. It didn't have his name anywhere on the profile. His handle was his initials. It mentioned the company that he worked in and the city that he was located and the industry that he was in, all of which had been included in other searches I had just done. And so Google was able to identify a Twitter account I never would have found on my own. And it was only because it had looked at the last 5 queries I had done and realized that this account probably matched what I was looking for. Okay? Creepy? Yeah, perhaps a little bit, but I found something I wouldn't have found any other way. So I embrace it now. When I search, I make sure I'm signed in. I let Google track the whole series because I find things I wouldn't have found otherwise. Then I log out and I do another search. So I do it both ways, but I'm not consciously avoiding the fact that Google is expanding my search to help me find more based on my other queries. You follow that? So there are times that it's great. And then I go private, especially when I'm really digging through something and I want to find everything that there is on the topic. I'll log out of my browser, I'll go into incognito or private mode. You always find something a little bit different. Another thing that we used to be able to just go to a different country version of Google by going google.co.uk. And then Google said, oh, sweetheart, you silly girl. You're in the United States. You don't want to go to the UK. Let's keep you back here. And so Google would override based on the ISP that you were coming in from. And on the other hand, if you use a VPN and go to that country and then you open up that country's Google, you do in fact see that country's version of search results, and they are markedly different depending on what you're looking for. So I'll do that as well, especially if I'm looking for something outside the US. And then, depending again on how much customization I'm afraid I'm experiencing in my searching, I'll go really private. Other people talk about DuckDuckGo and StartPage, 2 of the really good private, we don't track you search engines. But I got curious about the ones beyond that. So Marcy Phelps, who's a librarian and a private investigator and a certified fraud examiner, her business went in all kinds of directions. She had a lot of reviews. She's reviewed like 15 or 20 private or anonymous search engines. So I looked at those to see which ones were most appropriate for like a wide range of people, not just for PI, due diligence kind of people, but the rest of us that just do regular searching. So I evaluated 4 of them, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I did the same search for all of them. I looked for the word neonicotinoids, which are they kill bees, honeybees, so ask me afterwards about neonicotinoids. And I compared the first 10 results to a regular Google search, just looked at, what were the sites that showed up, and I looked at the results for each one of the private search engines that I'll talk about in a second. Every one of them had at least 6 out of 10 that were unique to them and not to Google. And they were all equally relevant, just as good as the ones that I got from Google, as far, I mean, just looking at initial search. So the question is, what will they do that something else can't do? So I would encourage you to use at least one of these anonymous ones when you're doing any search that needs to be somewhat comprehensive. Okay, so the first one is Quant, Quant. They're based in France, and they've built their own search engine, so they're search index, so they're not relying on Google or Bing or anyone else's. The nice thing is that they have a filter that lets you say, I'm just looking for images, I'm just looking for video, whatever. The first 6 out of 10 results were not in the Google search results. So you'll see here on the left-hand side, there's that nice little filter so you can just search social media through Quant, or just search images, just search videos. So it's sort of nifty. The next one is Yippee.com, which is the survivor, I guess, of Clusty. Anyone remember Clusty, the clustering search engine? We'll have a moment of silence here. And Vivissimo. So it sort of comes from a mongrel background. I think of it as your basic pound puppy. So the nice thing about it is I use Yippee, and I used to use Clusty. When I've got a question and I'm getting a lot of irrelevant results, and I need to see what's the category, why am I getting this other stuff? And so getting a search engine that clusters results by topic on the fly helps me identify, oh, I'm pulling up too much stuff in this area, or alternatively, oh, right, it's all about this, I should narrow it down this way. So it's a way of just sort of giving me an on-the-fly taxonomy of what I'm retrieving based on my inquiry. So it sometimes helps you get better search results. And again, 6 out of 10 of the results, first 10 results were not in my Google search result. So this is what Yippee looks like. There's these results on the left that were organized by topic. You'll see up there, you can recategorize the results by sources, and that's they identify the URLs that appear most frequently. Sites is top-level domain. By time is, last day, last week, last month, and topics is what you have here. What's really interesting, you can't really see it, it's in red, so it doesn't even show up here, but there's an option called remix. So if you don't like the categories that it came up with as the results, hit remix, and it gives you a new set of categorizations. It's really kind of a, try it once when you're on hold somewhere if you want to just play around with it. It's really kind of interesting. That's when I do all my serious exploration of resources, Please hold for the next available attendant while we go and, have a coffee break. Anyway, another one of the private search engines is Moji. It's based in the UK, and again, it has its own web index, so it's not subject to the limitations or the whatevers of Google. What I like about it is that you can set no location. So instead of it assuming that you're in one country or another, at the bottom of the screen, it actually says planet Earth as your location, which clearly they're planning on expanding so that, when you're on the moon, they'll say, do you want to limit by astronomical unit, or anyway, I don't know. 7 out of 10 of the results were not in the Google search results. So it's organized kind of nicely. The regions are all sort of European-centric because they're based in the UK, but that's okay. I liked it because I could do a search without any geographic favoring of one country or another. And the last one, this is kind of weird, is Jibiru, which advertises uncensored anonymous search. And you're sort of like, really? What the heck? Okay, so the regular, the censored version, I guess, is actually just like Google. I think they use the Google search index, and all it is anonymized. So for example, I did a search here on neonicotinoids, and I get the same results I got in Google, 9 out of 10. It's fine, it's authoritative sources, it's fine. But see, the thing on there, I clicked on the all results, and then if I go to the uncensored, uncensored is those sites that Google intentionally suppresses because they're seen as low value or unreliable or whatever. So those are the things that Google goes, it's not just like things that don't normally show up, it's things that Google suppresses showing up. Well, they're getting rowdy over there. you get really weird stuff. 9 out of 10 of the results in the uncensored didn't show up in a Google search result, probably for good reason. But if you're looking for things that are, if you're looking for things that are obscure or you need to see a point of view, so I clicked on the censored, this is the uncensored, hot and dirty neonicotinoids. So the first one was Bayer plus Monsanto equals a match made in hell. And the next one was mass animal death news stories. So these are kind of, wild and off the page. But if you're looking for something obscure or controversial, this may be a way to find stuff that you wouldn't find in a Google search. In fact, you're guaranteed that when you look at the uncensored version, you will turn up stuff that Google doesn't consider to be high value for whatever reason. Using Google as a hack to find other sites. This was really, this is a feature that's been around for a long time, where you use the site search to search another site. I'm a member of a closed group on Facebook. It's something, troublesome catalogers and metadata fairies. How can you not want to join just with a name like that? And it's people who, that's all they do all day long is, they're catalogers and taxonomists, and I love that they care about this stuff so much. And one day, one of the people was talking about cataloging an adult film in their library. And one of the problems, if those of you that are catalogers, when you've got to get all that data, you go to some authoritative source for some quick information. So they normally go to IMDb to find film stuff. Okay, IMDb, Internet Movie Database, for the nobody in this room who hasn't heard about that before. So, if you do a search in IMDb for an adult movie, you get no hits. If you go to Google and you do site:/imdb.com and search for the title of an adult film, it retrieves it for you. It's in IMDb, they just don't index it in their internal search index. So you can't find it that way. So the things you learn from hanging out with metadata fairies, it's just the most amazing thing. So that was last month that they posted this. So remember, if you're not finding something that you're looking for, there may either intentionally or unintentionally, that site may be suppressing results from within that site for things that you may want to find. Just because you can't find it from an internal search doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'll never forget that one. This is a trick I learned from Tara Kalashane, so Tara, thank you so much. The idea of how to find two concepts that are, you want them both like in the same sentence, but they don't have to be necessarily next to each other. Well, you can't really tell Google that very well. Here's what's interesting. If you put those two words in these different 4 arrangements, the two words just next to each other with a space in between, hyphenating, even though that doesn't make sense to hyphenate them, enclosing them in quotes, and then enclosing them in quotes with an asterisk in the middle indicating that there can be intervening words between the two. Here's the thing, you get different results each time, all of which are good. So I tested that, looked for the first 30 search results, and I was doing a search on millennials and their attitudes towards sustainability. Okay, so those two words, millennials and sustainability, both have to be there, but they don't have to necessarily be next to each other. So just doing a search for the two words together, I got 5 unique hits that weren't in any of the other searches. When I hyphenated, now the hyphenating millennials-sustainability, you would think I would get 0 hits, right? Because when do you ever see those two words hyphenated? I got a whole lot of hits, and 3 of those I didn't get from just putting the two words next to each other. Same thing, when I put it in quotes, I got other unique hits, and when I put them in quotes with an asterisk in the middle, which I somehow managed to delete here, there we go, I got another 12 unique ones. So the point here is you have to try a whole lot of different approaches, even with the same words. Google has gotten smart. If you just reverse the words, you tend to get the same results. So they're on to us on that one, darn it. So we have to up our game. So the way to outsmart Google this time, when you're looking for two words that need to be close to each other, try all those permutations because you will get different results each time. Just wanted to do a shout out about Google Dataset Search. It's really for libraries who are in organizations where you've got people working with data sets. They're developing software, they're doing research, whatever. If they need to find good data sets, they tend to just look for something that's free without doing a whole lot of quality control. I'm overgeneralizing here, but I think we all know who we're talking about here. There's always someone in every organization who's like, oh, but it was free, so it's great. Anyway, if we take over that conversation and start looking for good open access data sets and creating a curated collection of those within our organization for a particular project, group, team, whatever, we start training them to realize we're not even just the source of information, we're getting them the stuff that they need better than they can do it themselves. That's why I'm mentioning Google's tool for this, because it's pretty handy, and it includes aggregators content as well. So there's a fair amount of content in there. Here's the problem, is it's relying on the metadata and the content within each record describing an open access data set. So I'm going to show you two records. Here's one. It's about tool use frequency by individual sea otters in California. Don't ask me how I found that one. And so all of these words here, and this description goes on for 2 more pages, okay? Each one of those words is indexed by Google. And so if you're doing a search for an open access data set, if it's got those words in it, you're likely to pull up this particular data set. And then there's another record. All the description is data on the area enclosed or unwalled for the apiaries. That's it. So the only way you would retrieve this data set is by looking for the word apiaries, basically. So the accessibility of these data sets varies very wildly, because Google is just taking the content that is found and putting it into and indexing it. So keep that in mind. The other alternative you could do with this is just to use Google Web Search to find good data sets, and then using, again, our usual tricks like using a site:/edu or .gov to limit the sources just to government or educational resources, including the looking for the topic in the title of the data set, which would have found me my apiaries one, I suppose. So it's just thinking creatively about the ways that we can find resources better than what our clients can find themselves. That's part of our new role in a way that, we used to be, in the old days, we were the gatekeepers. Well, the barbarians have overrun the gates, and there are no gates, there are no walls anymore, and they've all run amok. And you will not quote me on this, but I'm just saying this in this room. And so rather than us trying to put gates up and make people stop, we have to start attracting them by having better and easier to use collections of resources, so they're not running around. I'm not going to continue that analogy. I'm thinking of them running in the woods and going savage. That's it. We're trying to civilize the savages that have overrun the gate, and this is a way to do it. Boy, I've got an attitude today. It's a scary thing, isn't it? Okay, using maps creatively. This is just think differently about the tools that you have. Google Maps doesn't just get you from point A to point B. Use the street view to look at a business. If you're helping your organization in procurement and they say, they're buying from, Acme Widgets International Global Headquarters at, suite 1505, and you think they're in a skyscraper, you go to Google Street View and you see they're next to a used car dealer and a junk store, and there is no suite 15, it's somebody's house, whatever. Use a map to illustrate a deliverable. When I did that report on respiratory therapy training programs, I included a Google map, and I just put pinpoints where the countries that had the most programs were. It was a nice illustration. It took no time to do, and it was something that really stood out for my client. Or consider geocoding library content and showing on a map how they can find the content through a geographical approach as well as a subject approach and the other ways that we make things accessible. It's like making your content visually accessible as well as through the normal term searching that we're doing. So this is all just like thinking differently about how maps works. Bing, I don't talk much about searching Bing because I don't find it all that useful. In fact, it often seems like it's, hamsters on crack that are giving me results. And you can't quote me on that one. On the other hand, when I'm having troubles figuring something out, when I'm having troubles getting to the part of the question, when I'm narrowing down a question, I like Bing's, it does a reference interview on you in a really sort of a cute way. Let me show you one. I was doing some research, actually, on stress management, and that's kind of a general topic. It's like, gee, how do I start with something like that without getting a whole bunch of nonsense? So I did that search in Bing, and at the very top, it asked me, okay, would you like to know about treatment for stress management? So it gives me some ideas there. At the bottom of the page, it said, people also ask, oh, okay, here's 4 other kind of aspects of stress management. And then at the very bottom, it even has related searches for stress management, including fun group stress relief activities. And I'm sorry, but fun group activities is an oxymoron. So that one's clearly bogus. But the nice thing was I got a whole lot of ideas out of that for just putting in the question. I didn't even look at the guts of the results. I didn't look at any of the URLs that it presented to me. All I looked at were the questions at the top and the questions at the bottom. And it was, in fact, very helpful in helping me figure out what terms to use and how to narrow down my search into something that I needed. Then I took that insight and went over to Google and did the search. So there you go. Million Short, we've talked about Million Short for years, sort of the search engine for long tail content. It eliminates the most popular websites from the search results. You can say how many of the most popular sites are eliminated from your search results. It's great if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you're looking for the things that other people haven't found. You're guaranteed to find stuff you won't find in Google, almost by definition. That's the whole point. So I really like it for that. The filters that I find most handy, there's one that lets you either don't remove any, which is like, why are you bothering to use Million Short if you don't want to eliminate any of them? That's kind of stupid. Or eliminate the top 100. This isn't the top 100 search results. It's the top 100 sites. So it eliminates from your search results the 100 most popular websites that search engines retrieve, okay? Going down to eliminate the top 1,000,000, and then you really do get obscure stuff that that gets buried in everything else. The other thing I like about it, you can specify that you don't want sites that identifies as e-commerce, something that has a shopping cart on it. If you're doing research in an area that also the concept of it is something related to a product that people buy a lot, you're doing research on physiology and athletic shoes, you're going to get a whole bunch of shoe ads, So this lets you eliminate pages that it has detected a shopping cart on, which is really kind of a nice way to eliminate stuff that you couldn't do otherwise. So that's Million Short. Don't get too smart. This is Super Searcher Tips, and I'm telling you to get stupid. Not really, but don't get cute. The things that work really well for a fee-based online service where we feel so, we are so skilled. We've got 5 layers of nested logic and adjacency here and truncation there, and I am so butch. I can just this is the most amazing. Well, that's great in a fee-based online service. You try that with Google and it's just kind of like, oh, sweetheart, you're overthinking things. Let's simplify a little bit. I don't want Google to let me to try to underthink me. I'd rather do it myself, basically. I look at searching as much more grazing. I'm looking for a clue on where to go next. I'm never looking for the answer. I'm always looking for the next clue to something else. Sooner or later, I find it, but I assume I'm not going to find it from the first search. Trust, and that's sort of, when you're using a search engine that is tracking you, you have to sort of understand that it's a feature and a bug and absorb that, and you learn to love relevance ranking. You can't fight it, so you might as well just understand that it's happening and think about how to game it. Rather than fighting it, you figure out, okay, what are the 3 ways so that I can get the search engine, this tool, to rank things differently? And that's where, like, using some of those private search engines that I mentioned before, those are nice because it's someone else's relevance ranking. So it's not just Google's, but it's someone else's. I'm assuming it's always going to be, there's always going to be some bias in there, and I'm just getting different people's biases. I try different search approaches. So I'll try using the buzzwords in that industry, and then I try doing a search without that. I'll try to think about whether there's any differences in different locations if people use different words and what that retrieves and necessarily doesn't retrieve. If I'm looking for market research on the carbonated beverage market, if I'm looking for pop, I'll find information about the market in, the Rocky Mountain area where we still call it pop, but I don't think anybody else in the whole country does. So it's even, regional to the US. And here's a big one. Are you searching for process or outcome? If you're doing research, think about what's the point of this? Am I looking for how people do something or what they do with the end result? The consequence, the outcome of something. You use very different words and do different kinds of searches when you're talking about process sort of thing, how we do it, versus outcome and what we do next. So think about both. More about searching creatively. So this is sort of like look at a map as something other than a map. What else can I do with it? When I'm looking for information on people, I look at, local newspapers and business journals, not just aggregated, but going to, their hometown and searching for the Boulder Daily Camera or whatever. I'll always go into social media, even though, sometimes you find stuff, sometimes you don't. I started looking now for YouTube videos whenever I'm doing research on people. I'm surprised at how often, everyone puts videos out there, and it's surprising what you find. And this is the one that just never ceases to surprise me. If I'm looking for information on a person, I look for their name in Google Images, if I figured out what they look like from something else, so that I have a general sense I'd recognize them. And then I go through the search results from a Google Images search, so it's just faces of people. And if it looks like my same guy, I'll click through, and I have found unreported links where someone is on the board of a nonprofit, for example, and they forget to announce that, but their shining little face is there on the, here's our board, meet our board. And sometimes you don't even find their name anywhere else, but you get it through that. So as long as you know generally what the person looks like, it's always worth the extra 15 seconds to see what else you can find that way. I've sort of mentioned so many times that I always use multiple sources because I know that nothing is comprehensive. Nothing is, and I'm always going to find different results every time I do it. Another one of my secret weapons, which I mention here because, people in this room are the ones who create LibGuides. I use that whenever I'm trying to get smart on a topic. I used to always go to Wikipedia, and I've kind of quit. Now, I often see if a librarian has put together a LibGuide on a topic because often they have a faster or clearer sense of the resources that are available, and that's really often what I need. LinkedIn posts. Everyone knows about LinkedIn as sort of, online resumes, whatever. A lot of people are posting content on their profiles now, and I sort of look at it as Facebook for professionals. It's where the same number of conversations go on as you see in Facebook or Instagram or anywhere else. But the nice thing is it's people who are talking about business-related stuff. So if you do a search there, you search for content instead of people or jobs. It's kind of weird. Here's what it looks. You can find reports that people are posting about a particular topic, and it's real current. So it's just another social media platform that you're searching, but we often forget that LinkedIn is another content stream, just like Twitter is. So I was doing some research. Oh, this was the millennials and sustainability, and I was also looking at their home ownership trends. So I looked for Gen Z and homeowners, and one of the first things I found was a report that had been put out. I hadn't found it anywhere in a Google search, but I found it from searching content, which is where you're searching the posts of LinkedIn. It was really a nice surprise. And of course, just like when you're searching IMDb and you can't find certain films, using the site search also lets you find different versions. It's sort of a different cut of content within social media. It's not as comprehensive as searching within the social media itself, but sometimes I get different things. If I'm doing a complex search, I was looking for female participation in the workforce, I looked for content from LinkedIn, but I couldn't do this kind of a query with 2 phrases. LinkedIn didn't really support that well, but doing the same search in Google turned up some good stuff. So sometimes I just use Google as a way to do a more sophisticated search. Remember that sometimes you have to talk to people. If there's you're not clear, my respiratory therapy training program, I got the answers that I needed, the lead to go to the final place by finding some college that teaches respiratory therapy. They had a contact us box with a contact thing, and I didn't fill that out. I figured out who the dean of that school was. I went over to LinkedIn and got his email address there, and I sent him an in-mail through LinkedIn asking him where I should go next, and I got a response within 15 minutes. I had this project because another researcher couldn't find the answer, and he sent a query through the contact box and never heard from anyone. I got an answer in 15 minutes because I went through a resource that he could find. You're not stalking someone when you do that. You're not being weird, you're just being a researcher. So, get over yourself and just do those things until you can figure out what someone's email address is and reach out directly. Don't use those contact pages. Focus on teaching information hygiene to our clients. Teach them to ask questions like, who cares? Teach them to look for not the answer, but the next link, find the place where the information is contained. Don't just look for the magic answer because they're also trained to do that, but teach them to look for containers. Practice that look of shock, the spontaneous, unrehearsed, oh, you relied on a Google search for that. Huh. Wow. Just practice that in the mirror until you can have sort of that, you're disappointed, you expected better of them. So and start teaching them. Go to the second page of the search results, teach them about confirmation bias and how search engines feed into it. Teach them, you think that you could find the answer in Google search results. Let me compare that to my results, what I can find through the resources that the library has. Teach them that low-quality data equals low-quality results, and teach them how to evaluate free resources. Give them a checklist. Show them, this is the library seal of approval, is if you can match 8 of these 10 checklist items, this is a reliable resource. Or curate data sets for your organization, like I talked about before. Know how your users find information and be familiar with the resources they depend on so that you can talk about how this might be something better. So that you can talk about the pros and cons of social media platforms. And finally, have something to show them. This is one of those media hacks that gives you a little bit of reliability and authority. Is, hey, I'd like to teach you about how to search social media better and also see some of the other resources that the library has. And by the way, here's a tool to turn all the videos from turning on when you scroll down so that they don't auto start. So having just a trick like that really helps to just gain reliability. And I'm going to skip over this last one because this is just change one thing every 6 months, because if we're not, we're getting behind. Slides are here. I covered a lot. I'll be around afterward for the break if you've got any questions. Thank you very much for your attention.